have
You know,
hampered greater
you said things have started to change in the last few months and there's been dramatic progress, which there has. And there's a logic to it also, which we've heard Elbridge Colby and others, for example, writing about quite extensively, that it's one thing for the Americans to have allies, allies whom America has to look after. So therefore, America has to take the security burden, pay for it, and say, okay, how are we going to shield ally A or ally B or ally C? With India, it could be different. You can actually have a partner who can take care of itself and take care of security in this part of the Indian Ocean, provided it is helped to build its capability up to do that. Do you think that's the sort of light bulb that has gone off somewhere, and that's why a lot of these things are really moving quite fast?
Yeah, I think so. That's certainly part of it, and I think also just a realization that alliances are not necessary to make headway. I don't think either of these countries expect to sign mutual defense pacts or fight wars alongside each other. That's not what this relationship is all about. And certainly, the U.S. has had longtime allies that have led to major problems in relations. The U.S. has alliances with Pakistan, with Turkey, Saudi Arabia, a number of countries that haven't really worked out well. Whereas with India, it's not an alliance, but things are moving forward in a big way. And just look at how things are going. I mean, you now have this new one of the many things announced yesterday in the joint statement is a new Indian Ocean dialogue. Right? There's long been, in my view, a need for the two countries to establish formal mechanisms that can allow them to focus more on the threat posed by China in areas closer to India's neighborhood. We all know that the U.S. and India are cooperating in the Pacific Ocean through their membership in the Indo-Pacific Quad. But I think it's time to have something a bit more formal and mechanized to address the Indian Ocean issue. So, they're essentially acting as allies would in many contexts, expanding the scope of the geographic theater at which they share a view about a certain challenge and threat and making plans to address that.
Right. Indrani, would you agree with that? That acting as allies, even if they're not formal allies, is that the level of confidence and trust there is now? That level of transformation?
I would agree with Michael there because honestly, the level of trust you can see by the quality of discussions that even happen on a daily basis, and the level of trust. It isn't with everybody that India is doing the kind of deals or the kind of agreements, the kind of work that it is with the US.
So we talk about America changing its attitude to India, and it clearly has. Let's talk for a couple of minutes about India changing its attitude also.
Absolutely, we should look at that.
Let's remember what was it, civil nuclear deal?
Oh, yeah.
It was almost derailed because India didn't want to be in that closer relationship with the United States. Even today, even in the last few years, there'd be a lot of people who would say, well, China's not that bad, maybe we should try and talk to them, and how bad could it really get? And it's really taken possibly a strategic misstep by China to really alienate India and to show India China can never be your friend. China can never be somebody whom you can work with. You better figure out what
Yes, well, I think we realized a while ago that you cannot actually work with China, that China is your biggest strategic challenge. With the US, though, I mean, it's not, if you look at the deals that have come through, it's not a one-sided effort at all. It's India also investing, India also reaching out to the US. And I think India has had to do a lot of work and has had to think differently about working with the US. Because, you've seen Trump earlier, Biden now, presidents saying that there should be more burden sharing. Their traditional allies have cavilled, have complained. India has never complained. India has wanted to do more.
India has been willing to take the to shoulder the burden,
yes,
which
India's
is something which Americans should be happy
absolutely.
about. Mr. Kumar, changing attitudes, are you noticing that by now, do you think I think the Prime Minister called it the hesitancies of the past. Is that behind us now in India?
You see, I've been closely following your conversation here. I think it's too early to speak about that. There is no evidence, at least from the Indian pronouncements at any level, even in the run-up to the visit, symptomatic of this sort of a trend. I think our
We've
policymakers.
got the Prime Minister saying natural allies. You look at the space, the statements
Well,
he
this
made.
is in 1998 that we used this expression for the first time. You know, there's a lot of rhetoric in this relationship which is turned out to be hollow. We know that. You know, the point is not that. The point is this, that, you know, that India is very well aware that this is a period of transition in the world order. When you mentioned, for example, about allowing India or empowering India in a way to be responsible for the regional security in a certain part of the world, nobody is in a position to apportion it today, because there are other countries in the region. Indian Ocean itself, if you take, for example, there are many other countries, and you know, which are, you know, plowing their own path. Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, which is under sanctions, American sanctions. You speak about the Gulf. You know, Saudi Arabia is an extremely strained relationship. OPEC plus, it itself shows. Iran, Turkey, Egypt, all these are, you know, India's extended neighborhood. So when you look at all this, you know, you will find that I don't think our decision makers are ignorant. I think they are extremely very well informed, and if you closely follow the statements of External Affairs Minister, he is very well clued in.
All right. Let me just get that broader question of sharing the burden and the challenges of security in the entire broader region. Arzan Tarapur is now joining us, South Asia research scholar, Stanford University. He's actually in Taipei, which is interesting because that could well be one of the next places where people are going to be sitting and figuring out what can be done. Arzan, when you're looking at all that's happening between India and the United States, from the point of view of everyone else in Asia, everyone else in the world, if you're looking at this from the point of view of China, from the point of view of Taiwan, from the point of view of ASEAN, Europe, how do you think what we've seen in the last couple of days is being seen and interpreted from a global point of view?
So, I mean, everyone will have their own different points of view, right? So obviously how the state visit is being seen in Beijing is going to be quite different to how it's being seen among other like-minded countries, like in Canberra, for example, or in New Delhi, obviously, or even across Southeast Asia. I think one of the key aspects that we need to understand, with me sitting in Taiwan right now, is that what we've seen from the state visit is not about the US and India preparing at an operational level to improve their sort of immediate short-term military interoperability. There's a lot of work that's happening on that in that space continually, incrementally. There was a couple of announcements along those lines in the state visit as well, for example, with the posting of liaison officers to combatant commands. But I think the headline events of the state visit, the headline announceables of the state visit, are not about that sort of short-term contingency or crisis planning that is front of mind in many people in the region, right? What it really is about increasing India's capacity to effectively compete against China over the long term. So, you know, there was a controversial and widely read article that Ashley Tellis wrote last month, where he said that the United States cannot count on India to rush to its side in the case of a US-China crisis or conflict. And he's right, unless Indian security interests are directly implicated.
But I think the broader question, I mean, I'm glad, it's interesting you referred to that particular article, because that was going to be sort of linked to my next question.